Yes, it's Robert Phoenix here, broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, Texas, with another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. It's a warm 58 degrees here in the heart of the hill country. How's everybody this morning? As the world makes another rotation, another spin in the day of your life, and another story to tell. And I'm here to help you tell that story on a personal and a global level. What's going on? What's happening out there? I had to get my announcer voice on. Could you imagine if I did the show like that every day? Good morning, Judy. How are you today? Welcome to 15 Minutes of Flame. This is an opportunity for us to open our wounds and vent onto the collective stage world. Good morning, Justice Moody. Welcome to the show. Hey. Let's see. I have a little message here from YouTube. It says, welcome to live chat. Remember to guard your privacy and abide by our community guidelines. Hello, JMP. Ani Brito. Okay. Thank you, Google. Thank you, YouTube. Thank you. Thank you. I don't need to learn more. I need you to get the fuck out of my chat. It's like Big Brother. There's Paula Tuttle. Oh, have you seen that the owl has reached a new stage of illumination? There's Joe. Hey, is it still snowing down in North Carolina? There's Shari. There's Lynn. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. There's Natasha. So the owl has reached the violet ray stage of illumination, and is now communing. With Saint Germain, the violet ray of Saint Germain, also known as Cthulhu. Shari says, my neighbors at my new house said they have 16 inches. They're still not able to drive their roads. Joe says no, both of whom live in North Carolina. Steve and Chris, checking in from North Carolina, say no. Yes, the owl is taking care of lighting up his lower chakra. So now we're in the process of the illumination of the violet ray and the truth of Saint Germain, who apparently isn't Saint Germain also Francis Bacon? That's what I've heard from the esoteric realm, the I ams. So we got a lot to talk about today. Saint Germain was New Age buzz, the word of the 90s. I know, right? A little more. Francis Bacon is Shakespeare. Yeah, there's a lot. So I ran across Steve and Chris. You might find this to be interesting. I ran across these guys who think that Dee and Kelly were actually Shakespeare. So it gives you another little wrinkle. Crinkle in the wrinkle. Lot to talk about today. There's some major action, I guess, going down with Trump and Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen's been sentenced to 3 years. And the reason why is because I guess they found Michael Cohen guilty of political finance violation. Okay, so first of all, let's just kind of break this down a little bit. Weren't they there to find stuff on Russia? Wasn't what this was all about? Weren't they there to find information that the Russians had colluded with the Trump campaign, the Trump administration to somehow win the election? Wasn't that what that was all about? I mean, now they're basically dredging up payments that Donald Trump made to 2 strippers, one specifically Stormy Daniels, also known as Stephanie Clifford. And this was prior to him being president, right? And they believe that they have enough information to theoretically impeach Trump. Well, I don't know if that's really the case, not unless it happens after he's out of office. I don't think there's enough there. He didn't lie under oath. He didn't pull a Bill Clinton, but typical U.S. political bullshit. They went after this piece in his past, and Trump is partially to blame around this. Okay, and he paid women off to keep their mouth shut because he had sex with them and he was married and didn't want them to talk to the press. And ultimately, I guess that wasn't enough, and they were seeking a better deal somewhere else because they probably blew through their money. And the next thing you know, they are a cause celeb, especially Stormy Daniels, who now has to pay Donald Trump close to $300,000 in legal fees. I mean, what a fucked up, weird world this is, right? I mean, she's got to pay him money now, even though theoretically he paid her money a while ago, and now it's being used against him so that they could theoretically impeach him. It's not enough, but it's enough to drive a wedge in the public's mind. And that's all they really need, right? Last night, I had a really interesting conversation about programming. And the reason why it was interesting is because it happened down at the local place that I hang out called Silver Creek, which if you ever come to Fredericksburg, I will buy you a beverage of your choice at Silver Creek. If you want to drink some of our great sparkling water from Mexico, known as Topo Chico, I will buy you a Topo Chico. Or if you would like to have one of their fine homemade margaritas, I will buy that for you, but only if you come to Fredericksburg. Okay. Anyway, so I'm, having a little conversation. I'm talking with these two young guys, and one of them is from Laredo, and the other is from El Paso, and they were both Hispanic, and it was such a refreshing conversation to see young people waking up, right? Like this one guy, young guy, very cool young dude. He ditched his Instagram account because he wanted to have less virtual time and more real time with people. He says, all my friends think I'm a freak. They say, why did you do that? Why did you get rid of your Instagram account? He says, because I want to be able to experience the world in a different way. And so we got into a very interesting conversation about programming. And, of course, I've got plenty of stories around that. And they were very open to, because I was breaking down predictive programming and hidden in plain sight. So I gave them some examples, right? Like I talked about the episode of The Lone Gunman, which was a spinoff of the X-Files. And there's an episode of The Lone Gunman where they are actually predicting, I think it's about 9 to 10 months ahead of 9/11. 9/11. So it's an episode, and like planes are crashing into the Twin Towers. So how does that happen? Is it that, Chris Carter, who's the creator of the show, is he connected into this kind of collective vein and tapping into that information that's kind of running through our experience like a fiber optic wire? The answer probably to that is no. That Chris Carter probably knew in advance that 9/11 is going to happen and baked it into his show, right? It's like, okay, here you go. Here's some clues. We're going to tell you what's going on. You build this into the show, and then this indemnifies us because we're basically predictably programming this and telling you it's going to happen. So therefore we can make it happen. And 9/11 was planned a long ways off. Like I'm pretty sure that 9/11 was going to happen shortly after they built the Twin Towers. I think it was baked in there. Okay. So I was telling him about that, and I was telling him about hidden in plain sight. And the example that I use for hidden in plain sight is a movie called The Devil's Advocate, which stars Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino. And Al Pacino plays the devil, right? And Keanu Reeves plays a young lawyer from a southern state. And I said, you know who that movie's about? And they said, no. I said, that movie's about Bill Clinton, because the Keanu Reeves character approximates Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton together. That character is a cipher. And the reason why he's a cipher is because, of course, Bill Clinton, I'm going to use a term that may offend some people. Bill Clinton is a bastard. His mother was a little on the dubious side. His uncle raised him, and his uncle was kind of a local crime boss. He was a small-time pimp. rum runner, fixer, probably a small time dealer. That was his uncle, and his mother was connected to his uncle. So, kind of sketchy. Nobody, so who's Clinton's father, right? Well, if you go down to Arkansas, you'll and talk to people. A lot of people will tell you that his father's Winthrop Rockefeller, and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the elite will go around, and they will sire children with women, and they will keep their tabs on these children, and then they'll pluck them and they'll bring them into their world and into the sort of higher levels of the matrix. They're chosen. So this is what happened with Bill Clinton. He was chosen because he comes from a bloodline. How does the son of a kind of sketchy borderline personality whose uncle is a local, you know, minor crime boss become president of the United States? I mean, that shit just doesn't happen unless you're connected. Of course, that's what happened. So the other part, so this character from Devil's Advocate, Kevin, plays a lawyer from the South with a single mother. Okay, just keep that in mind. And he gets an offer from a law firm in New York because he winds up getting a sex offender and a child molester off at a trial. Who do we know that did that? That was Hillary Clinton. So that character in The Devil's Advocate, Kevin, is an aggregate, a composite of both Bill and Hillary. And of course, he goes to New York where he has to deal with the temptations of success and the temptations of the devil himself. What's interesting about that movie is that he's married to Charlize Theron. And when you watch that movie, you watch Charlize Theron go through a series of very, very traumatic events. And so traumatic that they actually split her and she winds up committing suicide. Now, this is not uncommon for Charlize Theron. If you look back into her background, her and her mother wound up killing her father because her father was theoretically abusive or whatever, right? So Charlize Theron comes from a basically traumatically programmed upbringing, and that's in the movie as well. So we have traumatization, the split of the consciousness, possession through that process, right? And then the Al Pacino character admits that he basically, screwed Keanu Reeves's mother, and he's Keanu Reeves's father. So the Al Pacino character is a cipher for Winthrop Rockefeller. So that's what that movie's about. If you really break it down and understand it, it's about a lot of other things, but there's a story, there's a narrative there, and that's called what? Hidden in plain sight. So I talked about predictive programming, I talked about hidden in plain sight, and these kids were very, very turned on, and they were understanding this whole idea around programming because this is where the whole conversation was going, and they were incredibly receptive. And I love the fact that this one kid says, I want to get out of the city. I want to spend more time in nature. I want to spend less time on my cell phone. I don't want to be around traffic. And so then I talked to them about the fourth turning. And I said, if you look at, and I explained the cycle of the fourth turning and where we are now, which is this process of kind of implosion, chaos. This is winter in America. I mean, let's be honest. Okay, this is not springtime for Trump in America. This is winter in America. And if you look at the fourth turning, the spring of America takes place right after World War II. It's the age of the heroes, right? The summer of America takes place during the 60s when we have the age of the artist. And clearly, it's also the summer of love. So it's the summer of love. It's the summer of America. It represents kind of the peak of the sun in a lot of ways, right? The height of, wealth. I mean, if you wanted to buy a house in the 60s, there was a lot of generational wealth. There wasn't a whole lot of debt at that time. It was like the peak, right? And then we get to the third phase, which is the Reagan era. And that is like the fall of America. That's when everything, like finally, all the fruit is there to be picked. And of course, it represents the fall seasonally. Reagan and the Reagan administration. It's like, okay, that's it now. Now, after that phase, we move into the winter of America, which is where we are now. And so they understood this. And I said, in the seed of winter, or in the snowpack or the snowfall of the winter of America is the seed of the new. That there will be a spring that comes out of this time. And I said, you are the seed of the new. You will be part of the new America. You will be part of whatever happens after this phase. And what he really was very lucid and clear about was that he realized that we would be moving back into a new spring and the new age of heroes, which is true, but it'll be a different kind of heroic expression. So we're having this conversation. It was great. It was totally great. And I'm just here to tell you that there are young people amongst us who understand what's going on. They understand that that they're moving away slowly but surely, at smaller numbers from the programming that's taking place in their life. So we also talked about Bumble and Tinder and all that stuff. And he says, I don't do that. I said, yeah, it's like, it's ruined relationships, it's ruined intimacy. When you have a relationship or you meet somebody that's not sort of part of this model of convenience, there are things that come into play. There are variables that come into play. And we've become so sort of programmed that, okay, this person doesn't look good enough or hot enough or whatever, right? So I'm going to move on from them. I'm going to find somebody who theoretically, matches up with my ideal. I'm going to hit that thing, and I'm going to try to hook up with that person. Okay, well, that's great. But what if you have, somebody who's not as theoretically, as beautiful or as attractive, that society says, well, this woman, this is not your woman. She doesn't have a butt the size of Iowa. And you know what I mean? It's like, but you wouldn't find out that that woman is really cool or that man was really cool either way, unless you sat down and talked to them like, oh, wow, there's a really interesting person in here. There's a person that likes to do things I like to do. There's a person who's loyal and devoted and committed. And it's part of the process. And when we introduce convenience, which we also talked about, that gets taken away. Convenience removes variables. Convenience removes variables, and variables are important. Too many variables, and you have chaos. But variables are important. They're an important part of life. Variables bring us the possibility of pivots and novelty, mutation as positive change. So one of the examples I brought up as a very interesting variable in how variables can change cultures was if you go back in time and you look at the end of feudal Japan. Japan for a long time was a feudal society, which means that if you lived in Japan, you were serving somebody, right? You were paying them taxes, you were fighting wars, whatever they told you to do, you were doing it, right? So the Japanese warlords, the Japanese ruling families, they finally, fight it out, and they basically have kind of one bloodline now that has been running Japan, since the fall of the kind of the feudal, warlord stage where, everybody was fighting each other and trying to, gain power over the masses. And so when that happened, that was at the end of the 1800s. Japan knew that they were coming into a time where they're probably going to have to not have a feudal society, okay, because people would be harder and harder to control. So Japan ended feudalism, and all these people who had been under the rule of feudalism didn't have jobs, they didn't have any kind of support, because even though you're under the thumb of a warlord, or or a ruler or a king, or you got stuff. You got like rice. They come off and drop the rice. You grow the rice, keep this for yourself, and give the rest to them. That was all gone. Okay, so you had hundreds of thousands of Japanese that were like, what are we going to do? Right? What's going to happen to our lives? Okay, so if you go all the way to the other side of the planet, and very few, if you look, like there are websites where you can look at anapodal relationships with land masses, and there are very few land masses that actually are like opposite one another. And I know this because I've spent hours on this website. But one of the land masses that are in opposition with one another is Japan and Brazil. Interesting. Okay. Is there a connection with Japan and Brazil? You bet there is. So what happens almost at the same time, right around the same time, that the Japanese are being liberated and the yoke of feudalism is being taken off their necks, or at least the ostensible one, right? In Brazil, the Portuguese who had settled there and had farms and ranches and were really looking to get into the land, exploit the land, grow rubber, crops, whatever, right? They were looking for a workforce. So what the Brazilians had done is they had advertised in Italy, like, hey, come to Brazil, come here, work here, and you can be part of this new thing. So a lot of Italians went to Brazil to work in and on these farms, and the Italians, of course, had a lot of background and history and experience in the agrarian world, growing wine grapes, whatever. Well, guess what happens? It's too hot for the Italians. They don't like it. They're used to more of a kind of cool Mediterranean climate, somewhat akin to California, and they find themselves in this, kind of equatorial sweatbox. So they're not into it, and a lot of Italians go back. Some stay, but a lot go back to Italy. Okay, so now all of a sudden the Brazilians are looking for a workforce. Well, guess what? All these Japanese people, who were part of this feudal system, respond to the call to go to Brazil. And it's a perfect match because their environment and their weather is very similar. At certain points during the summer, it gets very hot in Japan and very humid. And so they were really okay with the environmental conditions and the weather conditions in Brazil. And so they begin to integrate and work in Brazil. Okay, so now Sao Paulo has the largest Japanese population on the planet outside of Japan. And here's what's interesting, right? So the Japanese bring their culture to the Brazilians. And one of the things that the Japanese are really good at is martial arts, and particularly judo and jujitsu. So they begin to open jujitsu schools, and the Brazilians begin to take jujitsu. And there's a family called the Gracies, and they study with a Japanese jujitsu master, and they become, in their own right, their own sort of masters of jujitsu. And then when they have the beginning of the octagon matches and the octagon cages, the Gracies, who are these masters of jujitsu, come in and they dominate everything. And it starts this wave of BJJ, or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, all across the planet. Now, I'm not saying MMA is a great thing. MMA is what it is, right? It's Rome, it's gladiators, it's octagons, it's cage matches, right? But we look at what happened, and the Japanese became a variable inside that culture and changed that culture, and ultimately changed the world, because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has become, really the martial art that has dominated the 21st century, and it's a variable. And you don't get variables by insulating and isolating yourself with technology. Technology limits the variables, right? Technology limits the variables. For instance, let's say you go to, I'll use an old standard. Go to a record store. Remember a record store? You go to a record store, you might meet somebody. Maybe they're looking at an artist that's similar to your artist, and all of a sudden you connect and you start to talk about music, right? You go online, you buy your music now. How's that going to happen? It's not. It eliminates the variable, and variables are really important. So we talked about that. When variables are introduced into a culture, they create the potential for novelty and change. And I said that Trump introduced variables into the culture. This is what he did, right? Because when Trump got elected, he untied the tongue of millions of people. People who we went through this. We talked about the 8 years of Bush 2, utterly demoralizing, right? You look at the Bush bookends, 9/11, and then the financial crisis, the housing crisis. Those are the bookends for his presidency, with Abu Ghraib and Katrina slopped somewhere in the middle, right? And if you were looking for somebody who was presidential, somebody who theoretically had family values, he was a fake, phony, bullshit, pseudo-Christian, By the time you're done with Bush, you're fatigued. I mean, there was like presidential fatigue, dealing with and Bush did. Bush was always talking to the press. He was always talking to the press. He was always talking shit to the press. I mean, he was like, people just got fatigued. But then Obama comes in and it's like, oh my God, hope and change. Oh, what a breath of fresh air. Right? And then we get 8 years of Obama. The last four were all about divide and conquer, sponsoring Black Lives Matter. Yeah, that's right. He sponsored Black Lives Matter. When he left the office, Obama came in, he's going to be the great uniter, right? In his genetic code and makeup, he was black and he was white and he was international, and he was American. And who knows, he might have been a little Muslim, but he also went to this radical Christian church. And, all these things, all these influences come together and create this again, he's a cipher, right? He's an aggregate sort of figure character, but in there it becomes symbolic. He becomes this, persona for hope and change. Like, oh, thank God, the fatigue of Bush. By the way, he does happen to be black, and this is our chance to elect a black president and feel good about it. He's seems like he's a family guy. And of course, you get into the swamp of Obama, and there's a whole different story going on, right? But he's supposed to be the great uniter. That's how he comes on. He's got all the elements of synthesis there to unite all these different factions. And guess what? By the time he's done, he's the great divider. Trump isn't the great divider. He's not. Obama was the great divider. Nobody really talks about this. And I'm not here, to defend Trump, but Obama gets a huge pass, man. Huge pass. And he was behind BLM. Notice how the BLM movement doesn't really have the same kind of power and oomph. Maybe the Soros funding. We still have events where people are unfairly treated. Police brutality happens on the black side and the white side. Unfortunately, there is some stuff that goes down on the black side. Profiling. It's a heavy experience, man. I'm not going to deny that. Not going to deny the experience. But what we don't see is the political action and political theater after every single one of these events, which is what was happening during Obama. So Obama becomes the great divider, and now Trump comes in. Now Trump introduces the variable. And the variable, people who have been sitting by and waiting for the shit show to end, feeling betrayed on some level by Bush. Like when Obama was president, you never had people saying, oh, the good old days with Bush. Oh, I miss the good old days. Nobody was saying that because it wasn't the good old days. Even if you were at the start a semi-ardent supporter because he checked the box that he was a Republican, that he was white, that he was a Christian. By the time all that was over, even in the midst of Obama, you weren't looking in the rearview mirror wishing that motherfucker was president again because it was a disaster. It was a planned demolition. The Bush presidency was a planned demolition. That's what it exactly was. But most people kept their mouth shut. They kept hoping for it to get better somehow, right? Never did. It got worse and worse and worse and worse. So Mr. Hope and Change comes in. But he's no different. In fact, he's got another sort of wrinkle and angle to the planned demolition. It's ongoing. So here comes Trump, and for all his flaws, what he does is he introduces a variable because there's a group of people who've been sitting on their hands, with their mouths shut, just, seething with frustration and resentment. Holiday season comes around and they go to the store and they buy something. The person says, well, happy holidays. And they're sitting inside saying, why the fuck can't you just say Merry Christmas? My mother's like that, by the way. Why just can't you say Merry Christmas? I mean, it's little things like that. It's like they get pissed off at that. What's wrong with you? Why can't you just celebrate this thing that I celebrate? Why do you have to be so politically correct? I'm not here celebrating Kwanzaa. I'm not here celebrating Hanukkah. I'm not here celebrating Diwali or whatever. I'm here to celebrate Christmas, right or wrong, getting the date right, getting the persona right. I don't care. It's their thing, right? So here comes Trump, and Trump makes a big deal about Christmas now. People love him for that, right? He's the Christmas tree. He says Merry Christmas with his emphasis. whether it's real or not, he's speaking to the people. And this process started when he became engaged in running for president. He untied the tongues of, the silent majority and introduced a variable. He introduced a variable into the system. Okay. And when a variable is introduced, there is the possibility for mutation, novelty, and change. Now, what's happened since then is that you've had a group of people who are saying, fuck your variable. We're going to squash it like a bug, and we're going to introduce other theoretical variables, but they're not. It's really the same old story. It's the same old story that they did to Clinton. It's the same old story that they did to Nixon. We're going to get in here. We're going to basically drain this guy's resources. We're going to drain his energy. We're going to drain his power. We're going to drain we're going to besmirch him. His name will be he'll be vilified in public every single day. Right? That's not a variable. That's the same old song, SOS. But it's already happened. This thing with Trump has already happened. So whatever happens from here on out, right? Whatever happens, if he gets impeached, and I don't think he'll get impeached because he's much better being compromised for these people, unless of course they just say, okay, it's Pence time. And if that's the case and they've got a plan, so what would happen this would be very interesting, right? So if they impeach Trump, which, we still have 2 years, there's a lot that could happen. I don't think they can impeach him for the Michael Cohen stuff. I don't think that can happen. But they're going to look into his background and taxes and all that bullshit and continue to create this dark, shadowy cast over Trump. And Trump is not perfect. I'm telling you, he's got skeletons. He's got big skeletons. He's got Jeffrey Epstein skeletons, but they all do. They all have those skeletons. But if they do manage to do this and Trump becomes president, Pence is going to have to name a vice president. You know who that's going to be? It's going to be Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley will move into the vice president role. All right. And what will happen is that Pence will run in 2020 with Nikki Haley as his running mate. And then after Pence is done, Nikki Haley will be positioned as somebody who will take over the presidency or being voted for president. That's a scenario. It's not written in stone, right? Because as I mentioned, there are variables. So there is a variable introduced, and no matter what happens, you can't put it back in the box, right? You can't put it back in the box. So I'm going to read you something which is very interesting. And this is Trump speaking to this whole idea of variables. This is from Sputnik. Trump says people would revolt if he were to be impeached. I think he's right, actually. And why is that? Because this variable has been introduced into the system. Now, of course, they would have a plan for that, right? It's like, okay, here we go. You guys are revolting. Let's do something about that. Okay, so I'm going to read this. The U.S. president said in an interview he was not concerned he could be impeached, and that the payments his former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, made to women ahead of 2016 elections didn't violate campaign finance laws. Trump said he believes that it would be hard to impeach somebody who hasn't done anything wrong, and he's created the greatest economy in history of our country. A little hyperbole there by the big Cheeto, but that's okay. In an exclusive interview with Reuters in the Oval Office, I'm not concerned. No, I think that people would revolt if that happened. How many presidents talk about this? I mean, a lot of you have been around a while. I've never heard any president talk about, well, if I'm impeached, there's going to be a revolt. No, I mean, we're in a whole different world. We're in a different territory. We're on a different timeline. This is not, Kansas anymore, Dorothy. So when that happens, people are thinking, he's right. God damn it, if they do something, I'm going to do something about it. Because let's be clear, the silent majority or the people that are quote unquote MAGA related, it's a culture that tends to be reactive. It's a reactive culture. And the reason why it's reactive is because they just want to get on and live their lives. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. You fuck with me. Okay, now I'm going to react. Versus the other side who is very proactive. We want change. Change. The other people want status quo. It's like, I kind of like my life. And I'm not saying either one are right or wrong. I think a little change to the status quo people is okay. And I think a little status quo to the change people might help them. It's the story of Saturn and Uranus. The status quo, the silent majority, they're Saturnian. They pay their taxes, they go to church, they go on vacation if they can afford one. And then the change people are Uranian, right? So it's the Chiron dance. All right, let me keep reading here. Trump also slammed his former attorney Michael Cohen, who's scheduled to be sentenced on Wednesday in New York for his role in the payments to two women, adult film actress Stormy Daniels and former Playboy model Karen McDougal. Federal prosecutors in New York last week claimed that Trump directed Cohen to make six-figure payments to two women so they would not discuss their alleged affairs with the candidate ahead of the 2016 presidential election. They also suggest that the payments violated laws, as all campaign contributions must be disclosed and limited to $2,700 per person. I mean, come on now. Campaign violations happen all the time. Drill down, you'll find them, right? And they're parsing the language. This was not a campaign contribution, right? And besides, the campaign contribution is supposed to go in the other direction, going from the person who, like, if Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal were sending Trump $200,000, oh, hey, that might be a can. What was Stormy Daniels running for president? I didn't know. Was she on the ticket? Trump said that Cohen was telling lies to the prosecutor to get a lighter prison term. He called for a longer sentence for Cohen, saying that his ex-lawyer should have known the campaign finance laws. Michael Cohen is a lawyer. I assumed he would know what he was doing, Trump said, when asked if he had discussed campaign finance laws with Cohen. Number one, it wasn't a campaign contribution. If it were, it's only civil. And if it's only civil, there was no violation based on what we did. Okay, this guy is fighting for his public life. And the people that love Trump, they don't care. They don't care. They don't give a shit. But what this does do is it emboldens his critics and his enemies. Well, we got him now. We got him now. Trump also pointed out that the prosecutors are mostly focused on the money flows within his 2016 campaign, yet very little attention is paid to his Democratic opponent. I haven't heard this, but I can only tell you this. Hillary Clinton, her husband got money. She got money. She paid money. Why doesn't somebody talk about that? Trump? He's right. He's absolutely, I feel sorry for him in some ways. Because at every turn, the FBI, the CIA, and primarily the FBI has covered for Hillary Clinton. Because Hillary Clinton, the Bushes, Barack Obama, they're all connected to what we call the deep state. The deep state is run by the CIA. When John F. Kennedy was killed on 11/22/63, and yes, he was killed. No, he did not go to some underground base. Why do I know that? Because one of my clients' husband is a brain surgeon, and he was there. They brought Kennedy into a trauma ward, and he worked on Kennedy, okay? He worked on the guy. Couldn't save him. And when that happened, the CIA, in collusion with corporate America and people like George Bush and the Skull and Bones, began to run the United States. They began to run the government. Nixon came in, and Nixon was a bit of an outsider. Of course, he didn't last too long either, did he? No, Nixon was a Quaker, which I found interesting. Right, I think he was a Quaker, if I'm not mistaken. And most presidents are theoretically WASPs, right? Nixon's an outsider. He didn't last very long. They showed him the exit. Jimmy Carter was promoted as an outsider, but really wasn't. And he served his purpose. The thing that got Carter in trouble, he fired a bunch of CIA people. Somebody told him, one of his guys, maybe it was Lee Atwater, one of his people from the South. He had a Southern posse. And the president, Jimmy, you got to get rid of these CIA people. You know what they did to JFK? And so Carter probably said, okay, let's kick these guys out. Ultimately, the CIA wound up kind of doing Carter in, to be honest with you. These guys who had been, let go, they were angry. They were pissed off. Carter lasted 4 years. Played a role, though. He helped demoralize America a lot, a lot. It was interesting about Carter is that Carter led the boycott against the Russians and the Olympics. There was a 1980, right? Or it was 80. 1980, and we were supposed to go to Moscow where the 1980 Olympics were, and we didn't go. Carter led the boycott. And that was when the Russians were still commies, and they may still be commies now, but they were real commies back then. And we could have gone to the Olympics, and we could have kicked ass. We had great athletes, really great athletes, great basketball players, good college team. Didn't work. See you later. Sayonara. Goodbye. Would have been a great moment for America. Could have restored some national pride. But Carter didn't allow it. No, we're going to boycott Russia. We're going to boycott Russia because of their war in Afghanistan. And it violates human rights. Fast forward, where are we now? War in Afghanistan, war in Yemen, war in Syria. That's a whole nother story. Let's get back to this. Here's the Trump understanding the power of the tweet. This is his greatest power right now. It's not his ability to summon troops to the border, which was essentially poo-pooed and not allowed by Mike Mattis. Now, he doesn't have any power there, but he's got a lot of power with Twitter because he can speak to the people directly. And here's his tweet. Trump earlier on Monday dismissed all the allegations, pointing out that the transaction was private and wasn't a camp. Who's he contributing to? Who is he contributing to? Again, hush money. It's not a contribution. Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal, they're not running for office. He says, which it was not. But even if it was, it is only a civil case, like Obama's. But it was done correctly by a lawyer. There would not even be a fine. Lawyer's liability if he made a mistake, not me. Cohen just trying to get his sentence reduced. In capital letters, witch hunt. No, Donald, you did make a mistake. Okay. But it's a mistake that other people in your position who wield the same amount of power, or if not more, make all the time. But it just so happens that a group of people want to make your life hell and want to put this country through the ringer and want to subject us to a psychological, it's not even an experiment. It's a psychological operation. This is a big psyop to divide and conquer, to create feelings of enmity, unrest, chaos. You see, when there are too many variables introduced into a system, it becomes chaos. A few variables are okay. Too many, and you got a problem on your hand. And there are a lot of variables. But the big variable that Trump introduced was the fact that people began to wake up. And you cannot stop that process now. You cannot stop that process now. Once the awakening process takes place, it's a train that leaves the station and you are on it, right? And you're on it to the end, whatever that destination is. So Trump, with the Sun-Uranus conjunction, brought the awakening to the American people who had been dormant and asleep for a long time, knowing that things weren't right, knowing that there was trouble in Kansas, but the slumber has come to an end because of the continued volatility, antagonism, divide and conquer. People are waking up and people are making changes. People are seeing, they're beginning to see what's behind the curtain. This is the big variable. All right, let me check into the chat room with everybody. What do we got? Canal. Okay, we're talking about the Panama Canal. It's now owned by China. Lynn lives down there. Carter gave back canal to Panama. What else do we have here? Thumbs up. Hillary's in India for a wedding, but she will not be coming back soon. We'll see about that. Why can't Hillary just retire and go away far? Hillary has made a deal. Hillary has made a deal about running for president. She will do anything that her handlers and her masters tell her to do, even if she is coughing and falling, even if she's like held up by back braces, leg braces, even if she's drooling. If they tell her to run for president, she will run. That's why she won't go away. Speaking of hidden in plain sight, right? Speaking of hidden in plain sight, have you watched anything with this Google guy who is the CEO of Google? They're asking him questions, and there's this one senator who was what's the guy's name? Come to me. He was talking about a video on YouTube, and he was addressing the video, which contained imagery, footage of Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton essentially eating the face of a child. You guys know what that video is, right? They talked about it. They talked about it during these hearings. And it's like, how could you allow that video to be on YouTube? So while, the right side was talking about Google and censorship and how the algorithms are slanted towards, more progressive results, the banning of, shadow banning, all that stuff, right? They're all talking about it now. Well, the other side used it as an opportunity to talk about their side of things, which is, hey, look, you're offering up all this content and it's dangerous, it's divisive, it is subhuman, but it's also, again, kind of a hidden in plain sight moment. They're talking about it, they're addressing it, they're addressing this video, right? And it's like in the esoteric, sort of the dark esoteric order of things, they're doing their job. They're talking about it. See, we told you there's a video there, right? Hidden in plain sight. Now it's like, okay, well, we've done our job and we can begin to move on. We can do whatever it is we need to do next. But that video has become part of the public conversation now. And there's no mistake about that. There's no mistake at all. Because it actually, in a lot of ways, theoretically demystifies that video. Oh, look, these cranks on the right, they're always looking for a conspiracy. They're always going after Hillary Clinton. And oh my God, can you believe it? A video of Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton eating a child's face. What's that going to do to people who have not been studying the stuff and looking and researching for a long time? It's going to turn them off, theoretically, right? Theoretically. Unless now people are like, I knew it. I knew it. I knew it about those two. Of course. Let's see what else we have here. The comments. Juana says, I saw a video yesterday of Hillary Clinton dancing at an Indian wedding. And along with Beyonce. Yeah, interesting. What else here? Justice Moody says, see, the Google CEO was dumping shares this week, right after fire broke out at the Google China building. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, just like how, what's his name? The character known as Soros was dumping shares with Facebook. Ani says, narcissists, psychopaths can't stand being laughed at and or ignored. Perhaps we can mock them out of power. I think shunning is probably the best thing you can do. Shunning is the most cruel sort of activity that you can do to a human. So shunning them, shunning their businesses, shunning their news networks, unplugging. That's probably the best frontline strategy. Wait a minute, the video was fake, right? Could be fake, maybe. I don't know, but the fact is they brought it up. They brought the video up, and they brought it up so that they can demean the video and demean the people who'd be searching after such salacious, untrue, damaging, and slanderous content. Right? Haven't seen the video. There are some people. It's like maybe you don't want to. Yeah, I think you. I don't know if it's up now. They may have taken it down. I think there's more. I think there's more dangerous videos out there than that one. To be honest with you. All right, let's hear a little good news. A little good news here. So Congress just voted to legalize hemp. We talked about this yesterday, and it's happened. So the farm bill was passed. Let's have a little bit of applause here. So this is what McConnell says. I'll just read you the story. It's not very long. This is from Vox.com. With a push from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Congress just voted to legalize hemp. Okay, a lot of people were dissing Congress and the Senate and government because they'll take hemp, they'll genetically modify it, big business will come in, Georgia Pacific will become the big hemp grower. I don't care. I don't care. You now have the ability to go ahead and start growing hemp. Make it happen. Start planting hemp. This is it. Get in while you can. Hemp is derived from the cannabis plant, but it doesn't get you high. Instead, it is typically used for its fiber to make all kinds of products: food, paper, cardboard, carpets, clothes, rope, and more. But hemp production and sales have historically been banned under federal drug laws that also prohibit marijuana. You might see some hemp products in some places in the US, but those usually come from technically illegal sources outside the country or places that got narrow exceptions under recent pilot programs. The bill passed by Congress won't legalize pot for recreational and medical uses. It only deals with hemp. McConnell, Republican, Kentucky, along with Senators Rand Paul, Kentucky, Jeff Merkley, Oregon, and Ron Wyden, Oregon. So we have the Oregon, Kentucky faction. In Oregon, way ahead of everybody with the decriminalization of marijuana, introduced the bill earlier this year. It was wrapped into the broader farm bill, which mostly deals with agricultural subsidies and food assistance programs, and passed legislation. President Donald Trump is expected to sign the bill into law. For McConnell, the hope is to make hemp a new source of jobs for his home state. He said earlier this year that he hopes hemp can become sometime in the future what tobacco was in Kentucky's past. As Don Sargent, reporter for Kentucky news outlets, some farmers in the state are similarly hoping that hemp can make up for the losses they're now seeing in tobacco as the nation has realized the health risks posed by cigarettes. Cigarettes themselves aren't necessarily bad. It's the additives in the cigarettes that are terrible. FYI. Nicotine is actually an interesting substance. Just ask Tucker Carlson. It's his drug of choice. All right, let me check back in with you in the chat room, see what's going on here before we sign out. Let's see. We got Shari. I want to build a hempcrete house. Local Asheville news rag just did a big spread about the hemp CBD buzz. Boom. Yes, absolutely. Hemp does heal. Sticky Mark says, I shun all authorities of those who claim to have it. Trouble is, I don't own a TV. So those who are new names takes a while. Just listen to my program. It's all you got to do, Sticky Marks. I'm your filter. This is what I do. I am your filter. And occasionally I add in and blend my own experience. You don't have to watch TV. Just come to 15 Minutes of Flame from 9 to 10 every morning. And you'll be introduced to the characters. And you don't have to. I'm taking it on for you. I'm providing a public service. You don't have to deal with toxic spew. I do because I cycle it through, right? I reconstitute it. I distill it. Let's see. What else do we have here? It's why I do. Thanks. There you go. It's why people show up here. Hey, listen, if you like the show, tell your friends. If you like what I do, tell your friends, have them come in, subscribe, hit the bell. Right? Everybody else does this. Don't forget to subscribe. If you want to support our show, you want to support what I do. I don't do that enough. I should, right? Anyway, if you want to support the show, you can. And a lot of you have, and thank you guys for those of you who have. Right? I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here till they turn the lights out. That's my dedication and promise to you. Okay. All right. I'm out of here. Where are the variables in your life? Look at the times in your life where variables have been introduced. It was something you weren't expecting. And how did it change your life? Because that's where the magic is. Variables are connected to chaos magic. And there is good energy in chaos. Certain chaos is good. Too much chaos and everything's got fucked up. Right? So look at the variables in your own life. And how can you be a variable in your own life and in the lives of others? That means that if you want to be one, you got to be able to get outside the box. You got to be able to get outside your routine. You got to be able to get outside of how you do things every now and then. Right? Right. All right. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. And this next generation, I just want to tell you, man, my conversation with those two young dudes is very positive. Very, very positive. There are, and I know the millennials get a lot of heat, but there are some gems amongst the millennials. There are seeds for the future in the millennials, and we need to nurture those seeds. We need to make sure that those people and those kids are supported, every step of the way. So when it's their time to step up and create the new world, which they will be a significant part of, that they'll have the support, the strength, and the fortitude and the courage to move forward and do that. Okay. I'm out of here. See you tomorrow.